Hi folks, welcome back to Brew and Build. It's time to make a second attempt at this Straffe Hendrik Tripel. Now, if you haven't seen the first video, I'll stick a card up the top here, and please have a look at that, and this whole process will probably make a little bit more sense. The general rules of this are we're trying to copy the Straffe Hendrik Tripel, which we don't know a huge amount about, but we do have to use 6 specialty malts, and we need 9%, and we also know the EBC of the beer, and that's really about all we know. So the first attempt on this, I missed the alcohol. My efficiency settings weren't great, and I didn't get the fermentation attenuation that I was expecting out of the yeast, so I ended up a bit short on alcohol. Now, one of my viewers actually wrote in the comments that he used Mangrove Jack's M41 yeast, and that worked very well. And having a look at the fermentation, and bear in mind M41 is quite a fermenter and an attenuator, that would have been a bit over 9%. So actually the first recipe with M41 I think would be a really good option for a dry yeast, certainly. Now if you do this new recipe I'm going to do with M41, you're going to end up well over 10%, so it's going to be quite a strong beer. The changes I needed to make on this from the last one, the notes I've got are I need less caramel notes, I need more toasted notes, and I need to up the alcohol. Now, bearing in mind we're juggling 6 malts to achieve this, that's quite tricky. But the changes I'm going to make on this are, the first one, I had 3.6 kilo of Pilsner malt. I am now going to use 3.2 kilo of Pilsner malt. The pale malt, I had 500 grams in the original one. I am going to up that to 900 grams, and that will help to increase the sort of toasted and malty notes in this. And on the toasted notes, the original one had 200 grams of Munich malt. I'm now going to use 200 grams of dark Munich malt, and that should certainly bring in that toasted malt note that I was looking for in the first attempt. I'm going to stick with the Cara Pils that I had in the first one. I had 100 grams. I'm now going to stick with 100 grams of Cara Pils in this. If nothing else, that should give us a little bit of head retention, a bit of foam on the top. It'll also increase some sweetness as well, obviously. On the part of less caramel, what I said was I dropped the crystal sort of side of it. So I'm going to get rid of the Cara Munich 2 that I had in the first one, which was 100 grams. And I'm changing that out for Carafa Special 1. And I'm only going to use 15 grams of that. Now 15 grams, I doubt you're going to be able to taste very much. You might, it will add a little bit of darker sort of depth to the beer, and that might be unwanted. And if that's the case, then I'll drop that out, and my second thought is possibly some biscuit malt, maybe 50 grams or something of biscuit malt instead. But at the moment I'm going to use 15 grams of Carafa Special 1. And as far as upping the alcohol goes, well, on the first one I had 900 grams of white sugar. I'm now going to use 1.2 kilo, so 1200 grams of white sugar. And that will up the alcohol, and it will thin the body down of the beer. So it'll make it lighter, which the first one needed a little bit, I think, as well. The hops on this will be unchanged from the first one. So I've got 53 grams of Saaz going in at 60 minutes. And then I've got 41 grams of Styrian Goldings going in at 30 minutes. So no change on that. Yeast, I'm going to stick with my White Labs Abbey Ale, WLP 530. The water, also unchanged. Just going to be a nice, light, balanced profile. And then the mash on this, I'm not sure whether I put that on the first one, but I dough in at 40 degrees Celsius. I then raise it up to 68 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. Raise it again to 71 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, and then I mash out at 77 degrees for 5 minutes. The fermentation, I'm pitching the yeast at its lower end at about 18.5 to 19 Celsius, and then I'll let that free rise up to close to 22 degrees over a couple of days, and then I'll ferment it out at that higher level for the rest of the fermentation. So I'll cut hopefully to the brewing sequence now, and then we'll come back later on and have a tasting. All right, this has been a long time coming. I admit that I've had this in the bottle for 6 months now, and there's been a couple of guys have asked me if I'm ever going to get this video out. So without further ado, let's get this open and see what it's like. I've only got a big bottle of this instead of a small one, so that's a shame really, isn't it? So get them both open. Right. Pour this one first. Right, I managed to get the carbonation up on this a little bit this time. It was a tiny bit low last time, so hopefully we got a bit better match with the Straffe Hendrik. Still not quite a match. The head retention on the Straffe Hendrik is still better than mine, I'm afraid. Just get a bit of a shot on that. So you can see from the colour there, there's a bit more suspended yeast in the Straffe Hendrik, whereas mine is very clear. But otherwise, I think if you take the yeast out of the equation, once again, I'd say the colours are pretty good on that. Just get that head topped up there. That looks a little bit better. And so, let's have a taste. Well, let's have a smell first. without getting it all over my nose. Right, the smell should be very similar to the version 1 because I haven't changed the hops, but there is a slight difference in smell between them. The hop smells the same. You can smell that same hop aroma between them, but the Straffe Hendrik smells a little bit sweeter, I gotta say. Not much, but a little bit sweeter, but the hops still smells very, very, very similar. So, taste-wise. So that's much better than version 1 in alcohol. So I've got that up to 8.7% this time. I'm still a bit shy of the 9% that I was after. But you can taste the extra alcohol in this. You can feel the extra alcohol. It's a slightly thinner, lighter feeling beer, but it's also a more alcoholic feeling beer. It's not as heavy bodied as the version 1, so that's in the right direction. There is a more toasted malt note in this, and that's from definitely the dark Munich. That's helped, and the Carafa Special 1, and dropping the Cara Munich out of it. So it's not as caramelly sweet. It's a little bit more dark roasted. Now, I'm not just telling you the comparison here because I'm just remembering it. I've tasted this with against the version 1, so I do know that they're different, and this has worked better. This is a more drinkable beer, if you like. But how does it compare to what we're trying to get closer to? Okay, so the Straffe Hendrik, still a little bit lighter. Mine has still got a bit more body to it. It's probably a little bit sweeter as well, actually. Yeah, it's a little bit sweeter. It's not a crystal malt sweet. It's not a Cara Munich type sweet that mine had the first time. It's definitely an alcohol sweet. There's more. There's just that little 0.3% would make an extra difference, but it's a little bit lighter bodied and feeling. Yeah, a little bit heavier. Very, very similar on taste, very similar on mouthfeel, how it coats your mouth, but mine is a little bit heavier in that respect. And to fix that, what I think I'll do next time is I'm going to mash slightly lower. I'll get a slightly lower temperature in there, get a bit more conversion, get a bit lower final gravity. That'll bring up the alcohol, it'll thin the beer down slightly, it'll lighten it a little bit, sweeten it a little bit, and it'll get it close to that. Taste-wise, wise, they're very close, really close. Slightly more depth of flavour in this. I'm probably not going to change this too much. I'll tweak it a little bit. I don't know that I'll bother doing another video for it because I'm actually really happy that I'm quite close on this. But I'll tell you what, the other thing I can notice is that this has a slight citrus end taste to it. there's an orange citrus aftertaste. It's not hugely strong. It's quite light, and mine doesn't have that, and that's making quite a difference just at the back end. It makes a noticeable final difference as it's sort of all fading away. You're left with this little bit of citrus, orange citrus. So what I'm going to do with mine next time is I'm going to put a little bit of orange zest, just a little bit of orange zest in the end of the boil, probably last 5 minutes, not very much. It doesn't need much. I don't want it to taste like an orange beer. I just want that very subtle note right at the end. Otherwise, I'm really happy with that. I think I have no doubt that it's nowhere near the malts that they use, but as a combination of malts to get close to the taste to copy that, it's actually quite close. It'll do with a little bit a little bit more tweaking, but otherwise I think I'm happy that is maybe not quite a clone exactly, but it's a very, very close copy of it. So I've got now a large bottle and a small bottle of triple to finish. So before I start rambling with ridiculous stuff, once I've drunk too much, we'll call it quits. So until next time, guys, life's good, drink more beer.